The clock shows 4 o'clock, so I'm going to go ahead and call to order this meeting of the Ad Hoc Bylaws Committee of the Del Mar College District Board of Regents.
Is your mic on?
Yes.
Okay. Shows green.
Yes, my mic's on. Can you hear me? Let me move a little closer. That may help. Is that better? Okay. We're calling the meeting to order at 4 o'clock p.m. on Thursday, April 1st. Let's check for a quorum. This is just a 3-person committee. Regent Hutchinson?
I'm here.
Regent Turner, are you there? And I'm Regent Averett, and I am here, so 2 out of the 3, we do have a quorum. With that, I would ask for a moment of silence, and then we will do the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you. I'll lead us in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Now if everybody would join me in the Del Mar College vision statement. Del Mar College will be the premier choice of life-changing educational opportunities provided by responsive, innovative faculty and staff who empower students to improve local and global communities. Del Mar College is streaming live audio and video from the official Ad Hoc Bylaws Committee meeting on the college's website in real time, with the exception of portions of the meeting considered as closed session by statute. We did allow public comment opportunity prior to the meeting, and I understand we do not have any public comment, so we will move forward with our agenda. This is primarily an organizational meeting, our initial meeting for this committee, and so we're going to have a discussion around our charge and any possible action in terms of what steps we want to take after sort of laying the groundwork. By virtue of our quorum call, we pretty much introduced the committee members. We also have Dr. Escamilla with us, as well as our general counsel, Mr. Rivera. We appreciate y'all's support and help in helping us carry out these duties. So I'm going to move on to the history of our bylaws and ethics review by the board because I'm the new person here. Regent Hutchinson and Mr. Rivera, you all have been part of some of our past bylaws revisions when it comes to board ethics. And I wanted to ask you all just to provide a brief history of what we did several years ago. And I'll turn it over to you, Mr. Rivera.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah, please.
Regent Hutchinson, since you were the chair of that committee, please fill in the gaps if I miss anything.
Yeah.
But back in 2012, the board decided that they wanted to conduct a review of the bylaws just to see. It had been a while since that had been looked at. And it was a committee like this one that was appointed by the then chair, Regent Hutchinson and Regents Estrada and Watts and Rivas were on the committee. And they met like this and reviewed the bylaws for general things like clarity, I think, and consistency. And it was at that time that they talked about implementing the practice of doing an annual ethics review, as well as there's the code of ethics that you all sign every year upon the completion of that review as a reminder, I guess, and as an actual action that you take where the board members each reaffirm their commitment to complying with ethical practices as stated in their bylaws. It was a good exercise, I think. Regent Hutchinson, if you want to, you were the actual chair of the committee. Do you remember?
Yeah, no, that pretty much sums it up. Our focus really was on the ethics and making sure that those were in line with what our expectations were, and that it was not just something that sat on the shelf. So by having a document that we were all signing, we were having to acknowledge it each year and really hoping to come to grips with it that way. We struggled, I know, with just historically with some of the things that were in the bylaws that we weren't necessarily doing. Not, I don't mean to say we were violating our bylaws, but they didn't particularly describe what we were doing very well. Some of those things got left in, again, because it wasn't a contradiction, it was just an inconsistency maybe. So anyway, I'm thinking that we may want to think about that some more this time.
Okay, great.
And so then, just as a follow-through, since 2012, the board has conducted its annual, board ethics review, which I facilitate. You started out doing them in closed session, which was acceptable because it's in part legal advice that you're being provided. But then the board decided to be open about it. And so now you conduct it out in the open. So I will just add as a final point that I've had the opportunity to speak at different conferences on board ethics. And Regent Hutchinson, Dr. Scamillo, y'all were part of a panel in San Diego at the ACCT conference a few years ago. And I started out by asking the audience, which was made up of regents and trustees from other community colleges all around the country, whether they did anything like this, and y'all were kind of unique in that regard. So
I'm going to pause briefly because I'm getting some signs that some of our audio is a little light.
If you speak into the mic, because sometimes the mask is muffles your voice.
okay.
Okay.
Directly into the mic.
Gotcha.
Okay, so we're being told to speak directly into the mic, and when we talk, perhaps lower it just a little bit, and we want to make sure that everybody joining us virtually can hear us as well. So, yes, thank you. Thank you for letting us know. Anything else on the history that you think would be helpful for us to be aware of? It sounds like what we did was make sure we put into action some of the principles we may have had written, but didn't always reaffirm every year.
And I do think the things we reviewed, even if we didn't change them, it was important to look at them and remind ourselves what they said. So I don't think it's necessarily the goal to make lots of changes, but just to review it.
Right, right. Okay. Well, I'm sorry. Saying that, let's, I don't necessarily want to read our charter again. We went over that at our last full board meeting, so I think we all are aware of that, and it is available in our packet. So we just need to keep that top of mind as we move forward so that we do stay on track. We do have a goal of reporting back to the full board in September if possible. I would like us to try to reach that goal if we can. The idea is not for this committee to last forever, but to get in and do some good work and then get out and move on to something else. So that is certainly my hope there. Mr. Rivera, is there anything in looking at the statement of purpose and specific goals that you feel like we need to make sure that we just keep at the forefront of our actions and thoughts?
Yes. So Regent Averett, I would point to the statement of purposes use of I mean, I think that this is a good guide for you. You want to make sure that your bylaws harmonize, which means that, that they all fit together and that they all well, you've got consistency, but harmonize. There have been some changes that have been proposed, and you just want to make sure that it all fits and works together. And I'm not saying that you will find any disharmony, but you should look to it for that. Relevancy, that's going to be more subjective, but that will be, I think, part of what the committee is looking at. I mean, are these goals or standards of conduct still relevant to your roles and duties as a regent? Efficacy, do they work? And that's something, where you're looking at current bylaws and then trying to determine whether or not they actually work in the way that they're intended. And then consistency. I mean, is there anything that sticks out like a sore thumb? Again, this is not to say that you're going to find anything that's disharmonious or irrelevant or, inconsistent, but you should at least look for those standards.
And for the benefit of the public, the Board of Regents two meetings ago did receive some proposed changes to board policies around ethics and conflict of interest, and it is my understanding that this committee is to look at those proposed changes, develop some opinions, if you will, recommendations around those proposals, and weave them into what we likely will then propose to the entire board in September. Yep. Well, good. It sounds like we're all on the same page, which is always a good thing. Provided in our packet this time around, thank you very much, Mr. Rivera, were also our current board bylaws, our code of ethics. There are a few places where standards of conduct, codes of ethics show up, and so thank you for providing the many different places where it talks about how we should behave and conduct ourselves as regents. Do you want to review those briefly? And by that I don't mean obviously go through them one by one, but in a general manner,
Sure.
go over those with us. Thank you.
Right. I mean, I think, and this is under statement of conduct and ethics. Primarily, what's addressed is how you all act with each other in the boardroom during meetings. So your conduct in that regard is covered here. How you communicate with the president, CEO of the college, and with other staff, that's covered in here. So your communications are covered. How you communicate and present yourself out in public, what your conduct is there. That's also covered in this. So those are sort of the general areas of conduct that are looked at, and they're again very standard. And so I think one of your tasks will be to determine whether these still fit and whether this covers enough, or whether there are other new areas. Regent Averett, you and I have talked a little bit about some of the things y'all may tackle that are new, that weren't around maybe or as much of an issue back in 2012. But for example, how you conduct yourselves on social media.
Right, as technology has changed. May I ask a question about this statement of conduct and ethics that exists in our bylaws? Did the 2012 committee look at these items specifically? Do you recall? Or update anything in here?
Yeah,
Okay, okay.
that's right. Everything was reviewed, and if it didn't require change, if you know, if it wasn't broke, you didn't need to fix it.
Right,
So,
right. And then, Mr. Rivera, I know you and I have had this conversation in the past, but can you talk a little bit about how our statement of conduct and ethics, how that compares to state requirements and state law?
So there have been every institution's required to have a statement of ethics, or you know, some ethical guidelines that they're to follow, and some are very specific. Some have, you know, actual state law incorporated in there. That makes for a long statement of, you know, ethics. So whether you want that or not, you'll have to, you know, figure out. And others are more general, like what you have. So on that spectrum of how much law you incorporate into your statement of ethics, you're probably Del Mar's over on the general side, as opposed to having, you know, I mean, there's some colleges, for example, that have these specific statutes regarding conflicts of interest and what you have to report and not report, that are put into the statement of ethics. Is that answering your question?
It does.
Yeah.
I assume that our current guidelines, though, are in full compliance with whatever the state requires.
They are. There's
Right.
nothing that's not in compliance or that puts you on the other side or contrary to the law. It's just that you don't have everything that the law requires you to do or not do in your ethics.
Say that again?
Yeah, I think what you're saying is that we're not required to state
Right.
state law in our bylaws. It's there anyway. That's always, we're regardless of what we say, we've got to follow that. So there's no conflict between them we're in compliance, but we don't have to spell that out again.
I understand.
Does that make-
Okay.
does that
Yes,
answer?
I
Okay.
think so. And have there been any recent changes to state law that we need to be aware of that may require us to update anything on our end?
I would defer to Dr. Villarreal, who's our legislative guru. I don't think there's been anything recent. Dr. Escamilla, do you know of anything? I know there are things, I'm getting it confused because there's some things that are perhaps in the works.
There's typically, throughout every legislative session, a version or an attempt of laws coming, but I don't know anything that has solidified that hasn't come through the Association of Trustees or anything like that. Nothing comes to mind.
Sure. Well, and since we're in session, obviously I know that that organization will keep an eye on those things for us, and we will hear about that. And Dr. Villarreal keeps a close eye as well.
We'll make sure to get them to ask Dr. Villarreal to connect with Kat
Sure.
to see if there's anything that we're just missed.
Great. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yes, ma'am.
So this is really, I think, where the meat of our committee is. The next item on our agenda is an outline of our committee objectives and work tasks. And this is sort of, Regent Hutchinson, the open discussion part of this meeting so that we can talk about what we hope to accomplish, in line with our purpose. I know that you are very familiar with our ethics codes and conflict of interests guidelines that we have. And so I guess my question is, in general, what are your thoughts in approaching this committee? Where are the gaps perhaps that you think we may want to focus some time and attention on? I've certainly got some thoughts about what we may ask Mr. Rivera to do in terms of getting some information for us, but would love to hear some of your thoughts about the direction you'd like us to take.
Yeah, I don't think I have any terribly strong issues. I want to go through everything and, like I say, just remind myself. I think the fact that we've got a lot of new regents, it's a good time to get that input too. We're an evolving group. I do think the conflict of interest is a topic that keeps coming up that we need to be mindful of. But other than that, I'm ready to take it on as it comes.
Right. I agree, and I, in thinking about this committee, you're correct. The issue of conflict of interest and whether there are some actions that we may want to propose that might strengthen some of that language or clarify might be a better word of what our expectations are there. I think that's something that we're going to want to discuss for sure. Mr. Rivera already mentioned social media and that tension, if you will, between regents having their own freedom of speech and feeling comfortable in being able to offer an opinion while still abiding by the guidelines of that the chairman speaks for the entire board, and how do we work within social media in those confines as well, and whether we need to write some specific agreed upon principles that can help guide our behavior in that area.
And I think similar, like we've said, that, social media is a relatively new, compared to the history of this college and this board, a relatively new thing. A more recent issue we're dealing with is pandemic. The fact that we've got these remote meetings, that we're distancing, that we're not able to meet the public in person as much. I think that needs to be addressed.
Absolutely.
How we conduct ourselves in this kind of a meeting that we've never considered 18 months ago or less.
Right, and moving forward, because I understand from Mr. Rivera that even in non-pandemic times, there are some provisions for remote participation when we have an in-person quorum, if we have a regent or two who cannot participate in person, and whether we want to allow that as a board, and if so, should we put some guidelines around that in terms of what that looks like? Should people be required to have their cameras on? What can we do to ensure that a regent participating remotely is in a secure, safe place, particularly when it comes to closed session.
Exactly. That's the kind of issues I'm concerned about.
Yeah, y'all raised a good point about confidentiality of information. I think my concern is really never that any board member is going to intentionally violate or breach the confidentiality of information, but do so inadvertently, just not understanding that these are really, confidential matters, and that means they shouldn't be shared or discussed even generally. And I think I'm not suggesting that you have a problem with that at all, because I do think that the board, appears to be complying with the confidentiality, following that. But this is where you would want to put it in. This is where you would want to reinforce that and set it up as a standard.
Right, we don't have anything in writing right now that clarifies that.
I think that's right.
Right.
Not in detail.
Dr. Escamilla, did you want to?
It's a detail that will be important in 5 and 10 short years from now, and it has to do with the duties and responsibilities of the board, number 7. And this one occurred to me a while back, and frankly, I hadn't seen it until just today. So I'd like to point out that with the duties and responsibilities of the board, number 7, the board shall, shall establish and periodically review the mission of the college. It's a little detail. The way we've satisfied that over the years, and what happened was what evolved was our mission statement being read before each board meeting. Okay, that's critical. That's very important. I don't know if it's critical. We can call it critical, but very important to SAC COC. It's important to the college to remember its mission. Well, what's changed is what we read prior to the meeting is actually the vision statement. It's not the mission statement. So it would be important that number 7 be satisfied somehow in coming pending business and other things. It does not have to be every month. It's periodic. Periodic could mean every other year. I wouldn't advise us go that far. I've seen colleges, I've evaluated colleges that did that, more longer term type of thing. But it's an important piece that we adjust so that we are able to satisfy that requirement by way of our responsibility, by way of the board's responsibilities, and my responsibility as president of the college to ensure that that's happening. So that just kind of stuck out to me here just a little while ago. So
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
That's a very good note. Dr. Escamilla, not to put you on the spot, but are there, in general, are there just other gaps, if you will, that come to your mind? You have a lot of experience with other college presidents, obviously, with the associations. Is there anything that you've kind of thought, gee, I kind of wish our board would discuss this or think about this?
No, I thought nothing really stands out.
Okay.
I think the opportunity to come in the form of this committee and to be able to have open discussions on this and other items is the best thing to do. But no, nothing in particular comes to mind at this point.
As I mentioned, I think in a meeting, two board meetings ago, and this goes to the conflict of interest discussion, I would like us in this period to have some more discussion and review around vendor relationships with board members. And I say that as well, I'm not a new board member anymore, so I can't keep saying that, but as somebody who, that was something new for me to navigate when I became a board member, and suddenly a few people who I didn't normally hear from tried to contact me. And luckily I knew enough to call Mr. Rivera and Dr. Escamilla, but it would have been helpful to me if I'd had some guidelines, when this happens, here's the appropriate procedure, because given that we're a relatively small town with people who know each other, it would have been easy to innocently stumble into something that I might have regretted. And I don't mean actually taking anything from anybody, but even a conversation that I might have regretted innocently. And so I think it might help to have something in writing that helps the board members with
Yeah,
that.
I like that, Libby, not just the procedures and guidelines, but the protocol.
Right.
The what if. What
Right.
if this circumstance came up, what's the remedy or reaction that you should have?
Right,
That's good.
right. Yeah, because I was pretty unprepared for a couple of attempted conversations, so luckily
Okay.
my instincts were good. But I think that that would be helpful as well. And we did talk about that at the board meeting 2 board meetings ago when Weaver presented to us about potentially looking at, should we mirror some of the language that, I can't remember, Mr. Rivera, if it's the state or the federal government, about if a former regent goes to work for a vendor, that we might put in place a cooling off period before they can do any business with the college.
That's state law.
It is state
It's
law,
state
okay.
law. And so somebody who leaves an agency is not allowed to come be employed or work for a vendor that's doing business with the agency. I think that's what it is, but I'll track
Right,
that down.
but
Mhm.
yes, we were talking about trying to look at some of that language at least to see if we wanted to discuss that. Anything else come to mind, Regent Hutchinson?
They're all good things. I think we've got, we've got our work cut out for us.
Well, we're about to give a lot of
And we're
work to
gonna find
Augie,
more.
to Mr. Rivera.
And there's one other, if I
Sure,
can. If this
please,
is,
please.
Just, so you all have had to utilize your appointment power in your bylaws here recently more than anticipated.
Yes,
And so you may want to,
Appointments of new regents, you're talking about?
yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes, so
Like
and again, I'm not suggesting that it's broken at all, or that it hasn't worked as intended. In fact, it's worked. But given that you've had to do that, maybe you want to look at it and see if it's fine, or whether you want to upgrade it, or whatever.
I mean, I am open to that because we did have 2 within 6 months
Mhm.
roughly of each other. And the only thing, like you said, I'm not saying it's broken either.
Right.
I'm very happy with the outcome of those discussions. There was a lot of flexibility, I felt like, around timing of the positions being open and how long we would take applications. And there may be very good reasons for that, but I don't think it hurts for this committee to look at that, and then we may not do anything, but it wouldn't hurt.
Yep.
Yeah, you're good with
I
that.
agree. Flexibility is good, but we can build flexibility into any changes we make.
Okay.
If you
Good.
change it at all, like I said, I want to be very clear, this is not at all if it were a red flag, we'd be talking about this in closed session.
Of course.
So we are not, we're in open session, so it is not a concern. It's just, I think you have an opportunity, given that it's come up here recently, to take a look at it. It is in your bylaws. It's something that you all use to, as part of self-governance. So I think that would be appropriate for you to look at that as well.
Thank you. Thank you for that suggestion. In preparation for this meeting, I did, in fact, today attend a virtual session on board ethics and have attended some ACCT training in the past on the issue, but we're fortunate that Mr. Rivera is with us because he has presented a number of times at several conferences. And I think what I certainly want, and I've prepared Mr. Rivera for this, is I do want you to bring back to us what you think are some of the best practices among other community colleges, and not just community colleges, but like organizations, things that we may be missing. Our charge does talk quite a bit about looking to our peers to see what some of the suggestions may be. And I think you're our best source of information for that. I haven't seen that information gathered when it comes to what other colleges are specifically doing that we may want to adopt ourselves, or at least discuss. And so I would very much like you, and I know that you have a folder full of that already.
Several,
Yeah.
And,
more than a few folders, but I'd be
Yeah.
happy to do that.
Yeah,
and
I think that'll be
collate it.
helpful. So it's still a task to go through and look at what we already have. It's difficult to see what we don't have.
Right.
Where the gaps are. And so if by looking at others, you can figure out where our gaps are, that would be helpful.
And Susan, I don't know if you would agree, but you're right. In reading again everything that we do have, there's a lot of great language. There's a lot of great policies and practices already there. I think what I'm hoping that we can do is identify some more specific actions that we as a board may want to agree to support the principles that we already have in place.
Mhm. I
Yeah.
do, I agree.
I mean, much like the last committee chose to recommend that we do the annual ethics training, that we reaffirm that every year.
Mhm.
You know, to put into action what our written principles
Right.
are.
Okay.
Mr. Rivera, other suggestions that you may have for us? Or Dr. Escamilla? I should
Yeah,
ask you
I was
too.
gonna say, um,
In the order of business on number 5, under duties and responsibilities also, there's another piece in there, letter E, under the order of business. I know I feel like I'm editing right now, and that's not what we're looking for
That's okay.
necessarily, but I don't want to miss this. It also repeats in the order of business at Del Mar College's mission statement be repeated as part of the order of business. That's incorrect, and so, or we need to address that. So just as a detail, and that's the only thing that's kind of coming to mind. I'm taking it all in right now as I'm going through the document, so. And I'm
Well,
not- I didn't mean to be in editing mode, but that's what it's
That's
turning
good.
out so far.
No, thank you. We are going to need that, and while certainly I know the committee members will go through this, Mr. Rivera, we're going to ask that you go through it with a fine-tooth comb and see where those kinds of edits need to be made. Now is certainly our opportunity to do that. And you talked to us quite a bit about needing to harmonize between what currently exists and the proposals that Weaver had for some policy changes, should we think that those policy changes are necessary to harmonize those two. I do think one of our future meetings should probably be devoted to the Weaver proposals
Okay.
for us to go into that, because why harmonize them if there are things in there that we choose, that we say we don't think we should do
Right.
necessarily. So I think that should probably be one of our early meetings, to go through those as a group and decide if we're comfortable with those proposals.
Okay.
Other discussion?
I think, Regent Averett, it's important to note that you all, this isn't a project that has just come up. I mean, to remind everyone, because, and I find myself constantly saying this because I have COVID mush brain sometimes, and you forget what was last week. But you all had a board retreat earlier back in May.
Last
No,
May.
Is that right? May? A year ago. Wow. A year ago. And, you know, there was feedback that you all exchanged then, and so it's been something that's been building. So don't forget that. I mean, you've already gotten input from your board. It didn't just, this project isn't starting, you know, from ground zero. There's been quite a bit that you all have already done to get to this point. So that's just a
That's why
reminder.
I want to make sure we haven't missed something that we talked about at that meeting. So if we can all collect
Yep.
our brains and our history in your notes to do
Mhm.
that, that would be good. Libby, how do you see this working out towards a presentation or approval, hopefully, of any changes in September? Are you looking at a monthly meeting, or have you gotten that far?
I September's not that far away.
Yeah.
And I'd like to meet that deadline if at all
Yeah, yeah.
possible.
I agree.
I'm going to suggest that our next meeting be in 2 weeks if possible. And then potentially for the first few meetings, we may want to meet every 2 weeks. Eventually, it could be once a month, but I think at minimum, it will be once a month because we're only 5 or 6 months away from September.
Yeah, and I like the idea. Let's get on it sooner, partly
Yes.
while we've got the momentum. And I just know August and
Right,
July, between budget and maybe vacations this
Maybe,
year.
yeah.
right.
It gets difficult, so I'm on board.
Great, thank you. I am leaning toward every other week. I will get some dates to Delia and Mr. Rivera for that week of August 12th for our next
Okay.
meeting and.
April
and
12th.
April, yeah.
April, oh gosh, sorry. April 12th, so that we can keep going. We need to move pretty quickly, I think. I
Okay.
think you're right, the summer will slow down and I don't want to
Let's
lose
do
the
it.
momentum that we have. And Mr. Rivera, thank you for what you said just a minute ago. I should have said at the beginning that this committee was not formed out of any problem specifically at all. I think it was formed more out of a continued commitment by this board to have a strong ethics policy, strong ethical practices, and to continue a regular review of what we have, make sure that they are timely and modern and up to date with technology and with just evolving practices. And I'm really pleased that everybody was in support of this and that they were willing to, and that the chair appointed this committee, and we'll get the work done pretty quickly and hopefully be a model for other colleges. That's certainly my hope.
There you go.
Yeah.
Give Augie something else to talk about at the next convention.
That's
Right.
That's right. That's right.
That's exactly right. Any other discussion? Okay, we do have on our agenda the possibility of a closed session. Is there anything that we need to go into closed session
No, ma'am,
for?
not unless there's anything specific. It may become important, and just, again, there are things that you are certainly able and well required to discuss in public. But since you are talking about ethics, and there will be legal aspects to this, if at any time we need to go into closed session, I'll give you the high sign, or you ask me, can we talk about this in closed session?
Okay.
But not today.
Dr. Escamilla, do you have anything else?
No, I'd just like to recognize the importance of the board taking charge of this sort of function. It is up to you all to review yourselves. It is up to us as staff members to facilitate and support. That I'd like anyone listening to this to understand that is the role. And this is a board function to do this, and so it's a little. I'm in a support role, and I want people to understand that. And for you all, for you 9 to come together and take this topic as seriously as you're taking it is a critical thing, and certainly does, in my opinion, distinguish this group from many others across the country. So it's a very important thing that you all are doing, and we are here to support.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that. Well, we know, having worked with you, how important ethics and professional conduct, how important that is to you, and you obviously try to model that across the college. So
Yes, ma'am.
you should expect nothing less from your Board of Regents.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else? Okay, with that, we will stand adjourned at 4:39 PM. Oh, I'm sorry.
Well,
Augie,
so just to be sure, I mean, I will bring you for the next meeting, your next meeting in a couple of weeks, examples of other codes of conduct or ethical guidelines or bylaws from other sister institutions. I'll also look for industry, standards, best practices, and compile those and provide them to, what I'd like to do is provide them to you in advance of the meeting so that you have an opportunity to review them and actually talk about them
Yes,
at the meeting,
yes,
if that's okay.
that would be most helpful.
Okay.
Yes, thank you. Anything else? Okay, now we will adjourn at 4:39 PM. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.